Deep in the Cascadia wilderness, the untouched forest stretched for miles, as if endless, shielding countless mysteries beneath their towering canopy. Sergeant Lydia Carson of the Environmental Survey Division had been sent to these wilds for a standard recon mission charting unexplored territories to update obsolete maps. What started as a routine operation turned strange when the drones stopped responding. No tech failures were reported. It was as if something had scrambled their signals. Lydia's feet crunched on moss-covered ground, her boots sinking into the spongy earth. It was eerily quiet. The usual forest symphony birds chirping, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of insects was missing. The only sound was her own breath and the faint hum of her visor's heads-up display HUD, flickering warnings about interference. She paused, crouching beside an odd set of prints in the soil. Massive, humanoid, but distorted, like something had tried to hide its passing. Yet the trees around her felt, watchful, as though the very landscape was aware of her presence. Lydia tapped her helmet, recording the footprint before following the trail deeper into the forest. "This is Carson." "Does anyone copy?" she asked, her voice echoing through static. Nothing. The signal blackout was getting worse. Suddenly, a shadow darted through the trees. Lydia's hand went to her blaster instinctively, scanning the darkening woods for movement. There it was again, faster than anything she'd seen, weaving between the trees. Her heart pounded, her pulse syncing with the HUD's flashing alerts. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught sight of it, a figure, towering, shrouded in fur the color of wet earth, barely visible through the foliage. It moved with a fluidity that defied its immense size, and Lydia's breath caught in her throat. "Bigfoot," she whispered. But the rational part of her mind screamed that it couldn't be. Bigfoot was a myth, a tale spun by backwater communities to spook tourists. And yet, here it was. Lydia took a cautious step forward, her eyes tracking the creature's fleeting silhouette. She wasn't sure whether to be terrified or fascinated. But just as she raised her wrist to activate a deeper scan, the forest floor trembled. It wasn't just one. The shadows around her stirred as several more shapes emerged, blending almost seamlessly into the environment. Lydia froze, her instincts screaming to back away. Then she noticed something peculiar. The creatures weren't moving toward her, but instead circling, as if guarding something deeper within the forest. She took a chance, lowering her weapon. "I'm not here to harm you," she muttered under her breath, half hoping the creatures could understand. The tension hung in the air for a long moment. Then the creatures parted. A path. They were showing her a way. With a deep breath, Lydia followed, her mind racing with questions. What were they? Guardians of some ancient secret? Or perhaps something more than the primitive legends told? The creatures led her to a large stone circle, hidden beneath the mossy earth and veiled by thick vines. At its center stood an ancient monolith, humming softly, pulsating with energy far older than the forest itself. Symbols, alien and incomprehensible, covered its surface. Her HUD blinked furiously, reading the radiation, the energy output. It was off the charts. Lydia knelt by the monolith, her hand hovering just above the surface. This was a gateway, not just to understanding the creatures, but to something greater. Something. Alien. The creatures remained at the edge of the circle, watching her with an intelligence that chilled her to the core. They weren't just beasts. They were protectors, guardians of this ancient technology, safeguarding it from outsiders who could misuse it. As Lydia's fingers brushed the monolith, her vision swam. In a flash, she saw distant stars, alien worlds, and the colossal, bipedal creatures that once roamed the universe, now exiled to Earth, hidden in its wildest corners. Their role was simple: prevent humanity from awakening what shouldn't be touched. Suddenly, the world snapped back into focus. The forest creatures were gone, vanished into the shadows as if they had never been. The monolith dimmed, its energy retreating as the connection was severed. Lydia stood slowly, her pulse racing. She had touched something ancient, something far beyond human comprehension. The question now wasn't what she had discovered, it was whether anyone would believe her when she returned. But she knew the truth now. Bigfoot wasn't a myth. It was a warning, a gatekeeper to secrets that should remain buried, waiting for the day when humanity was wise enough to leave well enough alone. She turned back towards camp, her heart heavy with knowledge. Some legends, she realized, were never meant to be understood. The creatures watched her from the trees as she walked away, silent guardians of Earth's greatest secret. Lydia's trek back to camp felt longer. the weight of what she had just witnessed pressing on her shoulders. Every snap of a twig made her hyper-aware of her surroundings, but the creatures did not reappear. It was as though they had decided she was no longer a threat, or maybe they were simply watching from a distance, satisfied that she'd respected their domain. When she finally reached the outpost, the camp was eerily still. Her colleagues were supposed to be monitoring her through the network of drones, sensors, and satellites, but the screens flickered with static. The interference from the monolith had knocked out more than just her personal equipment. Lydia pulled off her helmet, her face damp with sweat, her mind racing. She approached the comms terminal, hammering the keys to re-establish a link with Central Command. "Come on. Give me something," she muttered. The screen blinked to life, finally reconnecting. "Carson, what the hell happened out there?" Commander Vance's voice came through the speakers, agitated and crackling with static. "We lost all telemetry. We've been trying to reach you for hours." "Commander, it's..." Lydia hesitated. How was she supposed to explain this? "It's complicated. Something in the forest jammed our systems." There was a pause. "Jammed? By what?" Lydia swallowed hard. "I'm not sure if you'll believe me, but the legends. The Bigfoot sightings, they're real." The silence on the other end stretched out uncomfortably long. "Carson, you can't be serious." Vance's tone was skeptical, but there was a hint of concern. "You've been out there too long. Could be hypoxia, or..." "I know what I saw," Lydia interrupted more forcefully than she intended. "They're real, but they're not what we think. There's more going on here, ancient technology, something alien. Those creatures aren't just animals. They're protecting something." She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "I found a monolith, Commander. It's not natural. The radiation signatures, the energy readings. It's advanced. Far beyond our understanding." Vance's voice was steady, but Lydia could hear the unease creeping in. "You're saying Bigfoot is guarding alien tech?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Lydia replied, her voice firm. "They've been here for who knows how long, keeping watch. We've always assumed the stories were just folklore, but they've been hiding something bigger, something we aren't ready for." Another long pause. Lydia could almost hear Vance weighing his options on the other end. "Get back to base immediately," Vance finally ordered, his tone sharp. "Don't engage with anything else out there. We'll send a retrieval team to bring you in." Lydia knew the retrieval team would come with more than just a ride home. They'd bring soldiers, scientists, containment protocols, everything to secure and study the site. And though part of her understood the necessity, another part of her felt an unease settle deep in her gut. The creatures hadn't harmed her. They had shown her something, trusted her with their secret. If the government came barging in with guns and labs, it would turn the peaceful guardians into something far more dangerous. But could she really defy orders? Could she go back to base and pretend she hadn't seen what she saw? Her hand hovered over the comms terminal, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. If she returned with this information, everything would change. The military would seize the monolith, dissect the creatures, turn it all into another secret war asset. If she stayed quiet, the truth would remain buried, untouched, waiting. Just as she was about to respond, the sound of rustling came from the edge of camp. Her body tensed. She reached for her sidearm but hesitated. The shadow moved closer, large and deliberate, though not hostile. One of the guardians appeared from the tree line, its towering form almost camouflaged by the dense greenery. Its eyes, intelligent and ancient, locked onto hers. For a long moment, they simply stared at one another, no threat, no fear, just understanding. Lydia's breath caught in her throat. This was a warning. They knew what would happen if more humans came. The balance would be shattered. The creature took a slow step back, then vanished into the forest as silently as it had come, leaving her with a choice. Lydia stood at the edge of the camp, her heart racing, her mind churning with indecision. She looked down at the comms terminal, Vance's voice calling her name. Then she turned the device off. She couldn't let them take this place. Not yet. Not until she understood more. Grabbing her gear, Lydia took one last look at the outpost before heading back into the forest, retracing her steps toward the monolith. This time she was going back not as a surveyor or a soldier, but as a seeker of the truth. And the guardians. They watched from the shadows, their silent ally returning to the heart of the forgotten world, where the secrets of both the stars and the earth awaited. Whatever lay beyond that monolith, Lydia knew one thing for certain: it was no longer a myth. The only question was whether she'd become its keeper or its next victim.